Out of all the text structures that we learn in EAMS, this is the one with the broadest application. You know what? I guarantee you will be able to use the text structure we're about to learn at least once after high school.
Everything you need to easily pass English ATAR. English ATAR made simple. Powered by Saints Coaching.
Welcome to the first lesson on interpretive texts. Before we continue, a quick word of warning. If you haven't watched and completed the activities for the first lesson in this module called Intro to Module 5, go and do that before continuing with this lesson. Intro to Module 5 tells you how to complete this module, and it introduces a bit of terminology that will make no sense unless you have seen and done the activities for that lesson. So it is essential pre-viewing. Don't say I didn't warn you. If you're still here, you've either just finished Intro to Module 5 if interpretive texts are your first text type preference, just completed all the lessons on persuasive or imaginative texts if interpretive texts are your second text type preference, or just completed all the lessons on persuasive and imaginative texts if interpretive texts are your third text type preference. Regardless of how far through this module you are, I just wanted to say well done. You are so bloody close to finishing this course and comfortably passing English ATAR. So on that note, let's just creep a little bit closer to pass English ATAR Island. Here is what is in store for this lesson. First up, we will highlight the type of interpretive text we're studying over the next 4 or 5 lessons. Spoiler alert, it is a blog post, and in order to properly study a blog post, we should probably discuss the fundamentals of it, so that's what we'll be doing soon. In discussing the fundamentals, we will define a blog. We'll also distinguish a blog post from a feature article. These two get confused a lot, so it's important to understand how they're different and similar. After that, we'll illustrate the key features of a formatted blog post. Then we will outline the structure of a blog post. Specifically, we will look at the structure of section 0, which is the headline. Then the structure of section 1, the introduction, section 2, main idea 1, section 3, main idea 2, section 4, main idea 3, and finally, section 5, the conclusion. Last main section of the lesson will involve a comparison of text type structures, and then we'll do a simple summary and go have a big fat nap. Let's just get this out of the way. The type of interpretive text we're studying is a blog post. Here are the fundamentals of it. The first fundamental is the definition of a blog. What is a blog? Our formal definition is a regularly updated website or web page, typically one run by an individual or small group that is written in an informal and conversational style. So 2 important factors about a blog. Firstly, it's run by an individual or small group. And secondly, it is written in an informal and conversational style. Bearing this stuff in mind, let's turn to the next subsection of the lesson, distinguishing a blog post from a feature article. As we saw just a moment ago, a blog post is run by an individual or small group, whereas a feature article is run by a medium to large media company. Blog post written in an informal and conversational style, whereas a feature article is written in a formal and informative style. An example of a blog post is how to say no when it matters most, or why I'm taking a long startup vacation. The link to this blog post is in the resources tab below the video, but here is a screenshot of what that blog post looks like. So that is an example of a blog post. Here is an example of a feature article. It's called You Only Have One Shot, How Film Cameras Won Over a Younger Generation. Here is what it looks like. In short, a blog post is more amateur and conversational than a feature article. Let's turn to the key features of a formatted blog post. We're discussing this because when it comes to actually writing a blog post, formatting is paramount. Why is that? Basically, our attention span sucks. And because our attention sucks, formatting can be used to hold your audience attention longer. So even though there are a bunch of formatting things that you can do to hold your audience's attention longer in a blog post, I've identified the main ones that you should know about for English ATAR and life. First feature is dot points. Next feature, a numbered list, then a quote or a call out. We've also got headings, underlined text, white space, and finally, short paragraphs. So these are the 7 main features that you will be using in your blog post in English ATAR, but there are a couple of other features you should know about if you're thinking about writing a blog post outside of school. The 2 other main features you would use outside of English ATAR are firstly, emboldened text, and secondly, finally, images. We're not paying any attention to these two features for the purposes of English ATAR because you can't embolden text in an exam, or it's impractical to do so. You're not expected to, and you can't reproduce an image or a photograph in an exam either. But remember, on a web page, using emboldened text and images is a great way to break up chunks of information and ultimately hold your audience's attention longer. Let's have a bit more of an in-depth discussion about each of these 7 features that we are focusing on, starting with dot points. First question is, what are they? Dot points are these things. Dot points are useful because they separate large chunks of text into several smaller bite-sized pieces. Ultimately, this makes content easier for the audience to digest. We know what dot points are, we know why we should use them. The next question is, when should we use them? In short, you should use dot points to list 2 or more items. Here's an example. To give you a little taster, those experiences relate to the Philippines, university, and Sweden. Feature number 1, done. Let's turn to feature number 2, which is numbered lists. What is a numbered list? This. Dot points, but with numbers. Why is a numbered list useful? Numbered lists are useful for practically the same reasons that dot points are useful. To separate one large chunk of text into several smaller pieces. When should you use numbered lists? You should use a numbered list for items that you want to order in a particular way or have a set number. Here's one example for each one of those use cases. Starting with items that you want to order in a particular way. My top 3 values from favorite to least favorite are reliability, honesty, and simplicity. In this case, I wanted to order my values from my favorite to my least favorite. I could use dot points for this purpose, but a numbered list made more sense because my number 1 preference is reliability, my number 2 preference is honesty, and my number 3 preference is simplicity. The next use case for a numbered list is for items that have a set number. Here's an example. I hope you can apply the following 3 key takeaways in your life. If you're having a bad day, remember that it could always be a lot worse. If you feel stuck doing something you don't want to, remember that it's the hard times that make the good that much better. And if you're feeling helpless, take accountability and ask yourself, what could I do next time to avoid this situation? These items have a set number because I've said in this sentence the following 3 key takeaways. Once again, I could use dot points, but because these items have a set number, it's discrete. I can also use a numbered list and list them 1, 2, and 3 as I've done on the slide. Next key feature is a quote or a call out. If you're familiar with Notion, you would know a call out to look like the following. What is it? A quote or a call out is one small, concise, and significant piece of information you've written in a paragraph and reproduced in large-sized text after that paragraph. Why is it useful? Firstly, to break up the chunks of information that you've already written, and secondly, to emphasize a small piece of information that you want the audience to remember. When should you use a quote or a call out? After the main idea 2 section of your blog post, but before the main idea 3 section. Why should I use a quote, call out at that section of my blog? By this stage, the reader is probably 60 to 70% through your blog post and their attention is going down. Incorporating a quote or a call out at this point subconsciously tells the reader, thanks for your attention so far. I promise there is not much left to go. If you're wondering what you should take away from the section you just read, this is it. Here's an example. Regardless of what that thing is, persevering through it enables us to cherish what comes after. First 3 key features of a formatted blog post done. Let's move on to number 4, headings and subheadings. A heading is a division of a subject, a class, or category. A subheading is a subdivision of the subject, class, or category. Why are they useful? Firstly, to convey how sections of your text relate to one another. Secondly, to hint at what you're about to discuss. Example, university and perseverance, heading, esoteric legal questions, competition and coffee, subheading. Here are a few tips regarding headings and subheadings. Regarding headings specifically, capitalize the first letter of each main word. Also, align the text in the center of the page. Lastly, the text of the heading should be large. Some tips regarding subheadings. Capitalize the first letter of the first word in the subheading. Also, align the text on the right left-hand side of the page. And finally, the text of the subheading should be smaller than the heading, but larger than the body text. Our 5th feature is underlined text. What is it? This. Why is it useful? Because it visually makes a piece of content stand out and tells the reader it's important. When should you do it? Whenever you want to emphasize a piece of text. Example, there and then I vowed never to let myself be in a situation like that again. I vowed that next time I'd be prepared. Emphasis on the words next time I'd be prepared. 2 tips regarding underlined text. Firstly, don't underline more than one sentence at a time. Ideally, just underline one word or phrase. And secondly, underline sparingly. Don't underline a lot, quality over quantity. Second last key feature is white space. What's white space? It literally just refers to the amount of white space between chunks of text. Note that white space is very similar to the idea of a paragraph break. Throwback to the structure lesson in Module 3. Space or break between 2 paragraphs. In other words, paragraph breaks refers to the art of determining whether to write one long paragraph or several smaller ones. Got any examples? Here's what a chunk of text looks like with white space. The white space is literally the amount of space between this last sentence and this subheading and this first sentence. This is what this chunk of text looks like without white space. Which version would you rather read? This or this? Final key feature is short paragraphs. What are they? Paragraphs that are short? Defining a short paragraph is pretty tricky, but let's just go with the following general rule of thumb: 2 to 6 sentences. Why are short paragraphs useful? Well, blog posts are a digital medium, meaning they're read on a screen. And that's significant because our attention spans are shorter when we're reading something on a screen compared to when we're reading something on paper. Basically, a short paragraph is less work for the reader than a long one. It's less overwhelming. When should you use short paragraphs? Use short paragraphs for each subsection of your blog post. Here's an example. I think we can all learn a lot by reflecting on our own greatest experiences, especially during times of hardship, because they remind us of what we're capable of. They remind us that we can persevere and endure almost anything. In a full-length blog post, these 2 sentences would constitute or represent one short paragraph that I would have in one subsection of a blog post. Let's move on to the main event, the structure of a blog post. If you've completed the section of this module about persuasive texts, you might have noticed that the structure of a persuasive text that we learnt was quite descriptive in that it outlined very specific details about what you should do in each part of it. The same is true of the following structure of a blog post. It's very specific and it outlines a step-by-step approach that you can essentially copy and paste into your own. I do want to highlight that this isn't the only way to write a good blog post. But if you're not sure how to approach an interpretive text, this is definitely a good way to go about it because it ensures, firstly, that the structure of your text is on point, and secondly, your text incorporates a variety of language features. Speaking of language features, recall the following section of the text type comparison table from the lesson called Intro to Module 5. At the top, we have the text types, and over here in this row, we've got language features that are relevant to each text type. Persuasive language features are relevant for persuasive texts, imaginative language features are relevant for imaginative texts, and both persuasive and imaginative language features are relevant for interpretive texts. What this tells us is that our blog post should use a mixture of persuasive and imaginative language features. Bear this in mind as we go through the following structure of a blog post. Before we do, here's a little key that explains the structure that we're about to look at. The text HL means write a headline. The letter H means write a heading. The letters SH mean write a subheading. When you see the word imaginative in brackets, this means the section predominantly uses imaginative language features. Same thing regarding the text persuasive and imaginative and persuasive. Also note that each subsection constitutes its own paragraph. That's our key. I don't expect you to really understand what any of this stuff means until we get into the actual structure and really examples over the next few lessons. This is what the structure looks like in all her glory. Let's look at the structure of section 0, which is the headline. The first component is the actual headline itself. The next component is the byline, then the comment section, and then the topic section. Here are all the components of the headline: H, B, C, T, but where's the pizzazz? So we are going to go with heavy boats can't tow. Don't know if I like it, but if you have any better suggestions that are appropriate, DM me on the platform and let me know. Let's quickly discuss each element, starting with the headline. Quite simply, the headline is the heading at the top of the blog post. Its objective is to capture the reader's attention and make them curious. Potential features or devices that can be used to create a compelling headline are as follows: alliteration, a pun, an idiom, a hypothetical question, an oxymoron, emotive language, a tricolon, direct address. Examples of headlines are to-do list destroying your productivity and dangerously safe, observations after 1 year of working from home. Notice the second example has a subtitle. Including a subtitle is optional. Note the use of a hypothetical question in the first example, as well as direct address through the use of the word your. In the second example, we've got the use of an oxymoron. See the LFB for a description of that one. Next element of the headline is the byline. The byline is a line beneath the headline that states the blog post's date of publication and author. Here's an example of a byline: 7 June 2022 by Amelia Hershington. Side note, consider the impact on the date you select on the content of your post. For example, if the date is 1 January 2023, you might start your blog post by writing, "Happy New Year, everyone." Another note regarding the blog post, and this is extremely important: use a pseudonym or fictitious name. You are not allowed to reveal your identity in the WACE exam. The markers can only identify you as number. This reduces the risk of bias, so do not write your name, use a fake one, like Amelia Hershington. Next element of the headline is the comments section. What's all this about? Well, it is conventional for a blog post to state the number of comments at the bottom of the web page. For example, you just write 17 comments. Make up a random number. Not that number. A note about the comments element. Using this element is telling the marker you are adhering to the conventions of the form, which is a blog post. It just makes it easy for the marker to identify that you are writing a blog post. Win-win. Final section of the headline is the topics element. Here, all you do is write 1 to 3 keywords that really embody the content of your blog post. The objective of this element is to give the reader the real essence of your post before they go and read it. For example, one topics element could look like focus, social media. This would tell the reader that the following blog post is about focus and social media. Another example: dieting, exercise, mindfulness. Tells the reader the following blog post is about dieting, exercise, mindfulness. One more: politics, racial equality. You get the idea. That's a discussion of each individual element of the headline. Here is what all of them look like together. Dangerously safe, observations after 1 year of working from home. That's our headline. Next up, we've got the byline. 7 June 2022 by Amelia Hershington. Here are the comments, 17 comments, and here is the topics element: mental health, productivity, lifestyle. So that is the structure of section 0, the headline. Let's turn to section 1, the introduction. And we encounter the beautiful top funnel once again. First subsection is the activate. Subsection 1.2 is relevance. Subsection 1.3 is outline. Collectively, we have ARO, or as I like to say, angry, rude octopus. Let's discuss each subsection in more detail, starting with the activate, subsection 1.1. This requires you to write a few sentences that firstly, immediately engage the reader, and secondly, relate to the question or your post topic or topics. The objective of the activate is to captivate the reader. Here are some potential features or devices that you can incorporate in the activate: anecdote, direct address, hypothetical situation, provocative statement, rhetorical question. Next subsection is the relevance section. This is a couple of sentences that firstly state why the topic's important, and secondly explain who the topic or blog post applies to. Why is the topic important? Why should I bother reading it? When you're stating why the topic is important, you can use hyperbole or emotive language. When you're explaining who the topic applies to, consider using inclusive language or appeals to values. The third and final subsection is the outline. This is simply 1 to 3 sentences that outline what the post will discuss. The objective here is really just to pique the reader's curiosity. And as far as features or devices that I recommend you use in this subsection, really it's either dot points or numbered lists. That is the structure of the intro. Here is the structure of section 2, main idea number 1, the focus of which is imaginative language features. Also note the letter H here, which means that we're writing a heading. Here are are the subheadings of this section. Section 2.1 is an idea subsection. Section 2.2, example or examples subsection. And section 2.3 is an explain subsection. Notice that section 2.2 and section 2.3 each have a subheading. And remember that above those two subheadings is the actual heading of the section. So our three subsections of section 2 are idea, examples, and explain. Let's use introverted, emotional, echidna instead. Turning to subsection 2.1 first. The idea subsection is 1 to 3 sentences that describe or refer to the main idea section 2 discusses. Note that you don't need to explicitly state the idea as clearly or directly as you would in the topic sentence for a persuasive speech. Subsection 2.2 is the example/examples subsection. Note the letters SH, which means you would put a subheading before the body of the text for this subsection. In this subsection, you discuss 1 to 2 examples that illustrate the finer details of the main idea for this section. As you do that, consider using the following devices or techniques: anecdote, hypothetical situation, provocative statement, rhetorical question, analogy, imagery, metaphor, simile, emotive language, inclusive language, symbolism, onomatopoeia. Last one is the explain, which also has a subheading. For this subsection, you should explain the main idea's significance or broader implications. The objective of this subsection is to help the reader understand how and why the example or examples relates to them. Here are some potential features or devices to incorporate in this subsection: hypothetical question, rhetorical question, hyperbole, emotive language, satire. That is the structure of section 2. Let's turn to section 3. Main idea number 2, the focus of which is persuasive language features, and don't forget, this section also has a heading. Here's the relevant part of the tube, and here are the subsections. Subsection 3.1, idea, 3.2, example, 3.3, explain. Subsection 3.4, quote. And these are our 4 subsections. We shall remember these 4 subsections as introverted, emotional, echidna, quest. Subsection 3.1 should be 1 to 3 sentences that describe or refer to the main idea section 3 discusses. As we said for subsection 2.1, the idea for section 2, you don't need to explicitly state the idea like you would your reason in a topic sentence of a persuasive speech. The next subsection is 3.2, example or examples. We've got a subheading here, and this requires you to discuss 1 to 2 examples that illustrate the finer details of the main idea. Consider using the following devices or techniques: anecdote, hypothetical situation, provocative statement, rhetorical question, concession, preempting, expert opinions, and quotes. Second last subsection of section 3 is the explain, which also has a subheading. This requires you to explain the main idea's significance or broader implications. Once again, the objective is to help the reader understand how and why the example relates to them. Some features or devices to consider using in this subsection: hypothetical question, rhetorical question, hyperbole, emotive language, satire. Final subsection of section 3 is subsection 3.4, the quote. This requires you to identify a concise and noteworthy piece of information you've written in S3.1, 3.2, or S3.3 and reproduce it in large size text. The objective of the quote is to get the reader to remember the quote. To do this, use the following features: white space and large text. That is the structure of section 3. Let's move on to the structure of section 4, main idea number 3, which has a blend of imaginative language features and persuasive language features. It also has a heading. Here is the last part of the tube. First subsection, 4.1, idea. Next subsection, 4.2, example, examples. It has a subheading. Final subsection is 4.3, explain, also has a subheading. Just like section 2, this one has 3 subsections. And because those subsections are exactly the same in the exact same order, idea, example, explain, I'm going to use the same acronym because if I didn't, it would be more confusing. And we also love introverted, emotional, echidna. This is what we do in the idea, very similar to the other ones. 1 to 3 sentences that describe or refer to the main idea the relevant section discusses. Next subsection, 4.2, examples. We've got a subheading, and this is where we discuss 1 to 2 examples that illustrate the finer details of the section's main idea. Consider using the following features or devices: anecdote, hypothetical situation, provocative statement, rhetorical question, statistics, evidence, examples, repetition, alliteration, anaphora, emotive language. Final subsection, 4.3, the explain, also has a subheading. This is what we do. Explain the main idea's significance, broader implications. Once again, the objective is to help the reader understand how and why the examples relate to them. Some features and devices to use for this subsection: hypothetical question, rhetorical question, hyperbole, emotive language, and satire. We're back with our beautiful bottom funnel. First subsection is 5.1, summary. 5.2, call to action. That's it. Their acronym is SC. I am not that narcissistic.
Everything you need.
No. So we have silly cat instead. For subsection 5.1, our job is to, firstly, write a few sentences that summarize the blog post main ideas, and secondly, list some key takeaways. The objective of subsection 5.1 is to make the reader feel like they've learned something new or gained value from your post. Consider using the following features or devices for subsection 5.1. Tricolon, dot points, numbered list, underlined text. Final subsection is 5.2, the call to action. This is 1 to 4 sentences that, firstly, refer back to the activate in the introduction, and secondly, call the reader to action. The objective of the CTA is to end on a positive note. Also, you want to gain the trust of the reader, and you want to get the reader to actually follow through with what your CTA is, what you're calling them to do. And that is the structure of a blog post. So simple. Blog post made simple. Before we wrap this session up, let's do a quick comparison of text type structures. This entire table is in the PDF study notes. I'm not going to go into too much detail with it, just going to highlight the main things. If interpretive texts aren't your first text type preference, you would have already seen this table in the other structure lesson, whether that be for persuasive texts or imaginative texts. However, don't disregard this section of the lesson if you've already seen the equivalent section before. Obviously, our focus in this lesson is on interpretive text, so it will be useful to look at the following section of the lesson through that lens. Turning to the title of each main text type in EAMS. An essay doesn't have one. Persuasive speech, it does, consists of the title, subtitle, and byline. A blog post consists of headline, byline, comments, topics, or heavy boats can't tow. And a short story has a title that alludes to a theme, character, or plot point. Next category is the intro or beginning. For an essay, we've got GTTBT, persuasive speech, AICRT, blog post, ARO, activate relevant outline, or angry rude octopus. The beginning of a short story is the exposition consisting of characters, setting, and action. Then for our body paragraphs or middle section of the text types, we've got the following. For an essay, that is BP1 or teal. Persuasive speech, Reason 1, focus is logos and the acronym is TILT. Blog post, section 2, main idea number 1. We're using imaginative language features and it also has a heading. Section 2 consists of 3 subsections. 2.1, idea, has a subheading. 2.2, example or examples. 2.3, explain, also has a subheading. For a short story, we've got the background section, and this consists of the trigger and the conflict. Similar situation for an essay. BP2, same thing, teal. Persuasive speech, reason 2, logos, tilt. Blog post, section 3, main idea number 2. The focus is on persuasive language features and it also has a heading. Very similar subsections to the previous section with the addition of the quote. For a short story, we have the rising action consists of the setback. Finally, BP3 for an essay. Once again, we have teal. Then for a persuasive speech, it's the counter-argument and reason 3 paragraph with a focus on pathos. We have teal. For a blog post, we have section 4, main idea number 3, which has a blend of imaginative language features and persuasive language features. This section also has a heading, and we've got the same first 3 elements that we had in the previous 2 sections. First one, idea, subheading. Next one, example. Final one, explain. The short story, this is the climax, and this includes the finale. Finally, we've got the conclusion or end. For an essay, this is just a conclusion. TTBG. For a persuasive speech, the conclusion has a focus of kairos, and the elements are TRCG. For a blog post, this is section 5, the conclusion. It has a heading and 2 subsections, summary, call to action. Finally, a short story. This section is all about the resolution, and it consists of the aftermath. And that is a comparison of the structure of each text type that we study in EAMS. I've personally found this comparison table useful in remembering each text type structure, and I hope you do too. That is all the main content for the lesson. Simple summary. The type of interpretive text we're studying is a blog post. But what is the definition of a blog post? A blog is a regularly updated website or web page, typically one run by an individual or small group that is written in an informal and conversational style. How is a blog post different from a feature article? A blog is run by an individual or small group. It is written in an informal and conversational style. A feature article is run by a medium to large media corporation, and it is written in a formal and informative style. What are the key features of a formatted blog post? Firstly, formatting is important because it can be used as a technique to hold the reader's attention. The features of formatting that you should use in a blog post include, number 1, dot points, numbered lists, a quote or a call out, headings, underlined text, white space, and short paragraphs. After we discuss the fundamentals of a blog post, we turn to the main event, the structure of a blog post. At the outset of this section, we noted that interpretive texts employ a combination of imaginative and persuasive language features. From there, we turn to the structure of section 0, which is the headline, and of course, this involves a headline. The mnemonic is heavy boats can't tow. The H in that acronym stands for the headline, and this is the heading at the top of the blog post, which is designed to capture the reader's attention and make them curious. The B stands for the byline, and this is a line beneath the headline that states the blog post's publication date and the author. The C stands for comments. This is a line that states the number of comments that are at the bottom of the web page. Finally, the T stands for topics, and this is 1 to 3 keywords that embody the content of your blog post. That is section 0. This is section 1, the introduction. Mnemonic, angry, rude octopus. The A stands for activate. The activate is a few sentences that immediately engage the reader and relate to the question or your post's topic or topics. The R stands for relevant. The relevant is a couple of sentences that state why the topic is important and explain who the topic or blog applies to. Final element is subsection 1.3, the outline. This is 1 to 3 sentences that outline what the post will discuss and pique the reader's curiosity. The structure of section 2, main idea number 1, uses imaginative language features, also has a heading. The mnemonic is introverted, emotional, echidna. First subsection is 2.1, the idea. This is 1 to 3 sentences that describe or refer to the main idea. Section 2 discusses. The E is example or examples. It has a subheading. This is where you discuss 1 to 2 examples that illustrate the finer details of the main idea. Finally, the explain also has a subheading. This explains the main idea's significance or broader implications. That's section 2. This is section 3. Main idea number 2 uses persuasive language features, has a heading. The mnemonic, introverted, emotional, echidna, quest. Section 3.1, idea, 1 to 3 sentences that describe, refer to the main idea. Section 3 discusses. The E is the example, has a subheading. 1 to 2 examples that illustrate the finer details of the main idea. 3.3, explain, has a subheading, explains the main idea's significance or broader implications. 3.4 is the quote. Here you should identify a concise or noteworthy piece of information you've written in section 3.1, 3.2, or 3.3, and then reproduce that in large text. Section 4 is main idea number 3, and this uses a blend of imaginative language features and persuasive language features. It also has a heading. The mnemonic: introverted, emotional, echidna. Section 4.1, idea, 1 to 3 sentences that describe or refer to the main idea. Section 4 discusses. Repetition is good. Section 4.2, example, examples. It has a subheading. Here you discuss 1 to 2 examples that illustrate the finer details of the main idea. 4.3, explain, subheading. You explain the main idea's significance or broader implications. Finally, the structure of section 5, the conclusion, it has a heading. The mnemonic: silly cat. Section 5.1, summary. This is a few sentences that summarize the blog post's main ideas and list some key takeaways. The final subsection is the call to action. This is 1 to 4 sentences that refer back to the activate in the introduction and call the reader to action. Last section was comparison of text type structures. Check out the PDF study notes. First lesson on interpretive text done. Hopefully, after watching this lesson, you can see how essential understanding language features is to executing a great blog post. Because of this, the activities for this lesson get you to start reviewing your language features flashcards if you have stopped reviewing them for whatever reason. Also, don't worry if the structure we just saw is confusing. As always, it'll make much more sense when we turn to some examples. Until then, keep it simple.